Welcome to War Room, the official podcast of the U.S. Army War College online journal, graciously supported by the Army War College Foundation. Please join the conversation at warroom.armywarcollege.edu. We hope you enjoy the program.
Make sure not to miss a single podcast and subscribe to A Better Peace, the War Room podcast, at iTunes, Google Play, or your favorite subscription service. The views expressed in this presentation are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect those of the U.S. Army War College, U.S. Army, or Department of Defense.
Welcome to A Better Peace, the War Room podcast. I'm Ron Granieri, professor of history at the Department of National Security and Strategy at the U.S. Army War College and podcast editor of the War Room. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Perhaps the most visible part of the U.S. Army War College is its residential program, in which nearly 400 students come to Carlisle Barracks for a 10-month program, leading to a master's degree in strategic studies. But there is more to the War College than that. Nearly twice as many students enroll in the Army War College's distance education program, earning the same degree over 2 years while continuing with their day jobs. Here at A Better Peace, we consider it part of our mission to help members of the national security community understand the theory and practice of professional military education, and thus we think it important to introduce everyone to what we call here at the War College DDE, or the Department of Distance Education. This is the fourth in a series of discussions about the War College's distance education program and its place within professional military education. For these conversations, we have gone directly to the top, to the chair of the department, Colonel Heather Smigowski, and today we also have with us 3 recent DDE graduates, all from sister services, Donna Jenkins, Mark Nibert, and Ken Hills. Colonel Heather Smigowski is chair of the Department of Distance Education at the U.S. Army War College. She is herself a 2020 graduate of DDE and has also received a Bachelor of Arts from Western Michigan University and master's degrees from Clayton College of Natural Health, Regent University, and received her Doctor of Philosophy in Industrial Organizational Psychology from Capella University. Captain Donna Jenkins is a 2022 graduate of the U.S. Army War College's distance education program. She joins us from our sister service, the Navy, where she has 30 years of experience. Her current reserve assignment is U.S. Joint Forces Japan, where she says she's putting her Army War College lessons to good use. We look forward to hearing about that. Mr. Mark Nibert is a 2022 DDE graduate as well. He joins us from the Defense Information Systems Agency, located in Fort Meade at their headquarters. He works in defensive cyberspace operations and insider threat. And finally, Lieutenant Colonel Ken Hills is an academic year 23 graduate of the U.S. Army War College Department of Distance Education. He is an Air Force officer that has served as an Air Liaison Officer with the 2nd Infantry Division. This program has better enabled him to work with his Army counterparts and advise a division commanding general. Welcome to A Better Peace, colleagues. So Heather, I want to start with you now that to get a feel for these sister service students in DDE, where they fit within the larger footprint, let's say, of the distance education program.
Yes, Ron. It's great to have people here that are from the other services and also from the civilian organizations. They really bring a lot of experience to our students when they have a chance to get together and talk about their different experiences. So I actually did a little bit digging into how long we've actually had non-Army students in the distance program. And going back to 1990, I actually found that we had a few people that were non-Army. They were single digits at that time, only about 5 to 10. But I think it speaks to the fact that we understood for several years now, several decades, the importance of bringing those people in. So about 10 years ago, we increased that number, that we have about 10% non-Army. And then 5 years ago, we doubled that, went up to about 20%. And so right now we're sitting at about 25% of our students are non-Army.
Wow. All right. Well, that's definitely something that one wouldn't expect. And this has been a conscious policy decision on the part of the leadership of DDE?
So our students get joint professional military education level credit. And
Mm-hmm.
so because of the way the law is written, we have to have a certain percentage of students that are not your specific service.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to meet that requirement that Congress has laid out for us, we try to pull in as many people as we can. But again, when you're working at the strategic level, that's who you're working with. You're not just working with your own service. And so I think that that brings such a rich experience to everybody to understand those different experiences, different acronyms, the different way that you look at things. There's just a lot that goes into it that just brings that extra element to our education.
Mm-hmm. I can totally see that. It's similar to what we try to do with the resident program, and it's good to know that the distance program is carrying that responsibility too. Well, I want to ask the students. So, Donna, I want to start with you. Since let's say you come from the Army's oldest sibling, and like all close siblings, right? There's a familiarity and all kinds of other memories and attitudes between them. What's it like being a Navy officer in the distance program of the U.S. Army War College?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It was certainly a pleasure. Definitely wanted to experience something outside of my particular service, and wanted to get to know my brethren much better. Uh, I definitely felt in the minority, which is, I think, a good thing. And I think that the two different seminars that I was part of, you know, had a richness to them that allowed me to really see and gain insights, particularly with the Army, but of course the Air Force and the civilian agencies as well. And I think that's helped me along my journey.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting. And Mark, how about you as a civilian federal employee, right? What was your experience deciding, and what made you decide to try the Army's distance education program?
So at DISA, they do competitive programs, and every year, I look through different ones. At the time I applied for this, I was overseas in Bahrain running some net ops. So it's
Wow.
kind of a unique thing to look at, but also not being prior service, I felt that this was a really good way, not only jump into joint service, but to really kind of understand both sides and kind of understand the military piece.
Sure. And so by the time the school year started or your study started, were you back in CONUS, or did you actually start the actual program in Bahrain?
So I had a very interesting 2-year journey in its entirety. So I went from Bahrain. I was about 5 months into the actual program, and I moved to the UK. And then I did that until last March, and then I did the final 4 months here back at Fort Meade. So I made it a little bit more difficult by moving.
Did you and Donna have much contact with each other in seminar, or is it mere coincidence that you're both class of 2022?
We were in the first year studies together, actually.
Oh, interesting. Well, that's great. And Ken, for you, also speaking of siblings, right? I guess you're a younger sibling, although not the youngest anymore of the Army, right? Coming to us from the Air Force, right? What's it like being an Air Force officer in Army War College, DDE?
So, Ron, that was a really interesting experience because I had worked with our Army brothers and sisters, probably beginning around 2009 when I first served as an air liaison officer up at what used to be Camp Red Cloud. That gave me my foundational experience with MDMP, planning with our Army counterparts, and trying to be able to integrate what air power can do in support of the ground scheme of maneuver. So being able to see it from an academic perspective as opposed to the operational perspective or the tactical perspective, having been at the brigade as well as the division level, was very insightful.
I believe that. And do I understand, right, that you're coming to us live, as it were, from Montgomery, Alabama? You are currently at the Air War College in Alabama?
Ron, so that's correct. I'm currently at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama. I just graduated Air War College about a week and a half ago, back on the 18th of May. The Air Force values professional military education, not only the distance learning version, but the in-residence. So despite the fact that I end up graduating from the Army War College DDE back in 2021, I was still selected to attend the Air Force's in-residence program here at Maxwell, the Air War College. So two different types of programs, although the Army War College, I'd say, has It's an asynchronous program with synchronous-like characteristics. The Air Force still wants as many officers as practical to be able to attend a in-residence program based on various selection criteria.
Interesting. So you're one of the few people out there who has had both the residential and the distance experience.
So I'm probably one of the few individuals who's done the Army War College DDE via distance. The vast majority of Air Force officers will end up completing distance learning equivalent for our majors level PME, so Air Command and Staff College, similar to CGSC, as well as the distance learning version of Air War College. Historically, many of my mentors had suggested that you end up completing the distance learning version of your professional military education first to demonstrate your desire to attend the in-residence portion. So that's a little bit of the background as to why I wanted to do the Army War College program, because I'd already finished the Air War College distance learning back in 2017 and was looking for an additional challenge and also demonstrate that desire to be able to go to a in-residence program.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Well, and that's interesting. So you had previous distance education experience before you came to the Army. Donna and Mark, did either of you have previous experience with distance education before you started in the Army War College distance program?
Well, I'll go ahead and start, Mark, if that's all right with you. Yeah, so I did take some of the Navy correspondence courses through the Naval War College, but I didn't complete an entire program, but had some experience, obviously, with the distance. But interestingly enough, I also did an in-resident program, but prior to at the National Defense University, the Eisenhower School.
I got you. Okay. And Mark, how about you? Had you had any correspondence class or distance education experience?
So I did a little bit of it when I did my master's in computer science. It was kind of a hybrid thing they introduced back in 2011. On the other side of things, like I also work for a company that does cybersecurity teaching and mentoring.
Right.
So I actually teach all online. So I have it from the other side.
That's interesting too. Yeah, and so were there ever times when you were a student that you were either said, "Wow, this will actually help me with my teaching because now I realize what this looks like from the student perspective rather than the teaching perspective"?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You become more empathetic, right?
That's the goal anyway. That's right. I don't know. Some people learn that lesson better than others, but it is an important goal, important lesson to learn. For all three of you, right? What surprised you most about your experience for the Army's distance education? I'll go around the horn here. I will say I'll look for a volunteer to go first. Mark, go ahead.
So coming from computer science and being a techie, the sheer amount of reading was pretty surprising for me, and it was a huge focus shift for me from just technical projects and those kinds of things. But the camaraderie was absolutely amazing. The people, the networking. It's weird to be in an environment to where there's a team project and everybody jumps up to lead and do the work. That is definitely not my experience from private sector education. So.
This allows me to try out my favorite joke. Students always love that, right? As the person who says that when they die, they want their pallbearers to be their research team members because they want them to let him down one last time. Let's go. So, how about Donna or Ken? What was the thing that surprised you most about your experience?
So I tell you what I found the most surprising was the curricula itself for me. In that it's stacked on each other. So like the first class was very important to the second class and so on and so forth. And, obviously not my first rodeo when it comes to, going to classes, but usually they're more disparate. Like you might take economics and then there's a different subject and they are interrelated, but not necessarily, built on one another. So when we started off with leadership, that became necessary, understanding to be applied in the next class. Right. And we learned, all about the different types of planning that became important for the next one. And it just kept going like that. And ultimately the biggest surprise was how much I really enjoyed it all.
So you knew you were going to do it, but you didn't know that you were going to like it. Is that fair to say? Well, this is good. Well, when the boss is here to hear that you ended up liking it, right? That's very good. Ken, how about you? What surprised you most?
So I'd say not so much what surprised me, but what really impressed me
Mm-hmm.
was the dedication and the commitment of the faculty instructors.
Mm-hmm.
So having done previous distance education, in the old days, we used to have the box of books. So a box of books would be shipped to you. You'd study the material in the test or for the test, and then you'd end up taking a test, one a week or one a month. And then eventually you got through all the books and complete all the tests, and you received your certificate for completing the distance learning program.
Right.
I even did the Army's CGSC ILE Common Core. And even though that program had a little bit more interaction with instructors as in grading papers, you would submit your paper, you'd wait about 28 to 30 duty days, and you'd receive a grade back with maybe a little bit of feedback, but that was about the extent of the interaction.
Mm-hmm.
What I found the most surprising but also impressive was the faculty instructors, how they would set up opportunities to be able to chat as an entire seminar, even as we were in the distance phase, not necessarily the in-residence phase at Carlisle, and how very quickly they would get back to us either via email or text or phone to ensure that we were internalizing the material and had that cohesion as a seminar.
Sure. Well, and that gets to that interesting question, right? Is that for distance education, there's changing sort of pedagogical principles and changing pedagogical approaches go hand in hand with improved technology, right? The fact that we're able to record this podcast online with the 5 of us being in 5 different locations is already an indication how much easier it is to do these sorts of things. But it does make it possible for that mix of synchronous and asynchronous education, which gets me to that question of what was the single biggest challenge you felt you faced in pursuing your degree through distance, right? Was there any one particular thing that was difficult that you had to work through?
So Ron, I'll jump
Please,
on
Ken.
this one first. Yeah. The time zone difference was a significant challenge. So I'm sure that there can be a little bit of empathy here with being stationed on the other side of the planet and being able to interact. So as I mentioned earlier, Army War College is a asynchronous program with synchronous-like characteristics. Yes. So while I was taking this program, I was entirely stationed in the Republic of Korea with the exception of the second residence course. So I was already back in the States anyway. But there was a 13-hour difference during the summertime between Carlisle and Camp Humphreys in the Republic of Korea. So being able to manage that difference in time.
Yeah.
I also had the opportunity to experience the first residence course as a distance learning first residence course during the midst of the COVID pandemic in the summer of 2020. So my normal battle rhythm was waking up around 2200, starting course at 2230, working with my seminar and attending the lectures overnight until about 05 in the morning. I'd go PT, report to duty, and then usually get done around 16 or 16:30, catch a nap, and then run right back into it again. So there was a little bit of challenge associated with just the significant time zone differences. But that also provided opportunities because when we were doing the operational design phase, I was teamed up with a couple of my teammates who are guardsmen on the western half of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And so their morning was my day and their day was my morning, vice versa. And so we would work on a project. I would get handed to me during the day as they were calling it a night and hitting the rack. And then I would work on it during the day and I would hand it back to them when they woke up during their daytime. It was my evening time. And then I would hit the rack and we'd just continue to pass it around.
That's
so
great.
There was some opportunity despite the challenges.
Sure. That's a good way to make lemonade out of the lemons. Mark, how about you? We talked a little bit about your adventures in traveling. Was that your biggest challenge, or was there something even bigger than that?
No. So like Ken, I definitely felt the 8-hour difference. So I did lots of the things at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. But for me, it was the lack of military experience. So while everybody else has been in the military for a long time and they have all of this knowledge as they moved into it, I'm on Google or pinging my other classmates that says, "Hey, I don't know what this is. Can you help me understand?" I definitely know during FRC, we're doing the global force management and we're kind of doing forces. I had a lot of folks that had to kind of help me understand what a lot of that stuff meant.
That's fair.
But made it through it. And that was one of my goals of the War College. So, huge success with that.
That's great. And now you have an enormous store of acronyms to impress your civilian friends with.
To add on top of the ones that DISA has, which are different than the other parts of the DoD, right? So
yes, 100%. That's good. Donna, how about you?
Yeah, I didn't have the time challenge because being East Coast with Carlisle, and actually my reserve unit was in Mechanicsburg, which
Mm.
is right down the street, and so I even had the opportunity to kind of experience some of the in-person things at the college, like lecture series and stuff, if it happened to work out. My biggest challenge was myself and managing my time because I tend to be a procrastinator, and you cannot be, because there is just a voluminous amount of reading, synthesizing, and writing, and you can't wait till the last minute to put that all together
Mhm.
successfully anyway. So I think for me it was the overcoming myself,
Mm.
right, and getting into the groove of things.
That's what Mark says. If you wait to the last minute, if it only takes a minute, it might as well be the last minute, right? Isn't that what we've, this? Well, I will say, right, as someone who has never participated in a distance education program, I've always wondered about that, right? The temptations for procrastination when there is nobody watching you must be enormous. But at the same time, right, the schedule in front of you makes pretty clear that there's not a lot of possibility for that, that you have to be a self-starter to do it. That seems like a lesson that or something we'd want anybody who's thinking about doing distance education to know. Is there anything else that you would say, listen, if you're thinking about doing DDE, especially at the Army War College, but DDE in general, right? Is there something that somebody needs to know that you would pull that person aside and say, listen, if you're going to go, what
Ron,
please go ahead, Ken, please.
So Ron, you were kind of starting to allude to it a little bit. So
Mm-hmm.
almost that time management or that
Yeah.
schedule management. So I would advise someone up front that it's going to be a significant sacrifice for you, for your family, for your friends, because we like to talk about, as military professionals, work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
But such a thing really does not exist.
We talk about it a lot.
Absolutely. Instead, it comes down to, prioritization, surging in certain directions at a particular time when you have the bandwidth and availability to do that. And then also, seeking out integration. How can you integrate your family life with everything else that you're doing? So whether that's, early mornings or carving out time on the weekends to say, hey, this 2 hours is dedicated to my family. We're going to go to the park. And then carving out the remainder of the day to be able to focus on doing your studying. That's really what will actually make you a successful student, is just prioritizing, managing your schedule. I'd say it's doable. I would definitely caveat all that with that it is very doable. I was a squadron commander at the time that I was doing this program, so a battalion commander equivalent with all the UCMJ challenges that our Army brothers and sisters face when they're in command positions, as well as also trying to wear both an Air Force hat and sort of helping out on the Army side as well. With the challenges that the division I was supporting faced. Wow. So it's doable. It's just a matter of prioritizing, integrating life, and then surging in a particular direction when you need to, whether it's surging studying or surging your primary duties.
That's good. Donna, go ahead. You want to add something to that?
Yeah. Well, I would take it in a little bit different direction. I would obviously the time management is important, as I said, and people should know about that in advance. But I would also give the advice to take advantage of as many of the opportunities that's presented for the from the War College as that you can and that you need and that you can fit in while you're surging, to use Ken's word, in one direction or another. The movie series. Where the movie night on Tuesdays. I'm sorry, I can't think of the title of it, but
the strategic arts film program.
Those kind of things. The additional writing help, right? If you're not used to that collegiate formal format of writing, there's an opportunity to get additional help. And so I would tell people that there's a lot of resources available to you through the Army War College, and that you should embrace it and enjoy it, because it's 2 years and it's like deployment. It seems like day to day they're long, right? But then when you look back, it just flew by. And so I say, don't miss out on those things that you have the opportunity to.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. Mark, what were you doing in addition to being in 6 different places? But what was your day job while you were doing the DDE?
Yeah, so for me it was a challenge too, because I was a GS-13 when I got accepted for this. So my day job was running network operations for DISA, and we controlled all comms for CENTCOM. So as you can imagine, kind of like what Ken had, I didn't really get a lot of time off. You go to work, you do your 8 to 10 to 12 to whatever that looks like, come home, and then I spent my evenings doing the War College stuff, did a lot of the teaching and mentoring on top of all that. And then, when I graduated, I remember my wife was probably just as excited as I was because, you know, all of these deployments were with kids. So I have 4 kids. So they got to see me periodically, little snippets of Mark as I did different things. But, for me, it was time management that was huge. Definitely do the 2300 writing assignment because
Mhm.
writing code and writing for the War College are very different things. So I had to really kind of fix a lot of that. And then the number one thing, my favorite experience that I recommend anybody to consider is to do JLAS. That was
Ooh,
by far the absolute best experience
and
of War College.
remind our audience what JLAS stands for. Speaking of
So
acronyms.
Joint Land, Air, and Sea Strategic Exercise. So for that too, right? I got to participate last year as a student. I got to
Hmm.
come back this year as the cyber SME to help out DHS CISA and work the green white cell. But yeah, by far one of the best experiences I had.
Interesting, right? And Heather reminds me that 2300 is referred to as the optional orientation for distance students, so it allows you to get a little extra prep for the what you're going to have to do. I mean, it is always a challenge, right? The idea that the resident students here, right? They're full time students and they're physically here. You are, of course, a full-time employee of whatever it is you're doing. Like I had no idea, Ken, that you could be a squadron commander and doing DDE at the same time. Or that's a lot of work, and so one has to make a certain commitment to do that. And so, Donna, you say it goes fast. And a lot like podcasts can go by pretty fast when you're having a fun conversation like we're having here. But each of you said in your emails to me in advance of this conversation how you feel that your experience in DDE was especially valuable for you as you moved along in your career. And I'd like you to sort of bring us home by talking about how your experience at the War College and distance education has helped you or has helped to shape your next steps in your career and what you're doing. And I'll look for a volunteer as I scan the room, but I think I see Ken's hand going up. So go, Ken.
Ron, so I got 3 points. So the first, I would hope that the program has made me a better division air liaison officer.
Mhm.
Now, I will turn that assessment over to Lieutenant General Gilland at West Point to make that assessment because he was
We'll send
the
him a
division
message after
commanding
this
general.
podcast, Ken.
But I would hope that the education did help me better translate air power into the ground scheme maneuver.
Mm-hmm.
Second, since I did have the opportunity to attend Air War College in residence, I was able to then determine, rather than taking the traditional Air War College program, to specialize in a grand strategy concentration. So the Air War College grants a Master's of Strategic Studies, just like the Army War College, but I wanted to do something a little bit different than the traditional curriculum. So it allowed me to then say, hey, I've kind of done the primary curriculum at a sister service school. Let me do a slightly different curriculum at Air War College. And then the third and final point is, in my current position, I'm the Vice Commandant of the Global College of Professional Military Education under Air University, which is the distance learning institution for the Air Force. So having experienced a sister service distance learning program has provided me with a little more insight that I hope to be able to bring to the Global College of PME. And of course, I have to put in a shameless plug that our sister service members are more than happy to enroll in some of the Air Force's officer distance learning PME as well.
That's all right. I think even Colonel Smigowski will allow you to do that plug for the competition. That's okay because we're all in this together. How about you, Donna? What do you think about how has your work at the War College shaped you?
Yeah, so ironically, because this doesn't usually work out for naval reservists, is we don't get detailed into our next billet. We get slated. So it actually worked out for me that my follow-on billet is at U.S. Forces Japan, and so understanding that joint environment academically prior to to being in the command was extremely helpful. And then one of my colleagues mentioned it earlier too, the networking. So as it turned out, being here and at U.S. Forces Japan, having experienced the Army War College, some of my colleagues were actually in meetings with me while I was sitting in and being the J4 last month. So it's been an incredible experience, and I highly, highly recommend it to anybody who has the opportunity.
Fantastic, Donna. And Mark, what about you? Bring us home here.
Yeah, so I definitely think for me understanding the strategic thinking, strategic leadership, right? Knowing what the boss's boss thinks, and for us that's General Skinner, and I think it's helped as we do things and build things out, as I make decisions or work in groups, right? It's not necessarily at our level what makes important, right? Does it make sense for the boss as we move forward? And it kind of helps minimize some of those, siloed gaps of things. But the networking, the friendships, being an alumni. I've met 3 or 4 folks at DISA that graduated from it, right? You have that instant relationship, instant camaraderie. We all know what we've been through and learned together. And then again, my goal was to enhance knowledge and just, understanding military principles, and definitely working through the civ-mil relationships, and now understanding my part of that, and then making it even through an acquisitions course, which was definitely something that I've been told to do, but I purposely pushed it off because, again, I'm a cyber guy. That's at the bottom of the list for things that
That's fair.
interest me.
Well, and I guess it's a little bit like, throwing around a medicine ball and then throwing around a baseball, right? After having your days completely filled by all this work, now all of a sudden it must seem like you have nothing but free time to do other things, right?
It's Talladega Nights, right? Like I don't know what to do with my hands.
Outstanding. Well, you see, I'm glad to see that your experiences in DDE, of course, only enhanced your good humor and your sense of humor, because you came away happy students, right? And that, of course, makes us all. I know it makes Colonel Smigowski happy to see that the distance education program produces smart, well-adjusted, and generally happy people to continue to serve this great country of ours. But we are just about out of time for today. Thank you so much, Heather Smigowski, Mark Nibert, Ken Hills, and Donna Jenkins, for joining us on A Better Peace to talk about your experiences with the Army War College's distance education program.
My pleasure.
My pleasure as well.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, everybody. And thanks to all of you for listening in. Please send us your comments on this program and all the programs. Send us your suggestions for future programs. We're always interested in hearing from you. Please take a moment in all of your copious free time to subscribe to A Better Peace on your podcatcher of choice, because after listening to a conversation like this, what sensible person would not want to subscribe to A Better Peace? And after you have subscribed to A Better Peace, please take a moment to rate and review this podcast on your podcatcher of choice, because that makes it easier for other people to find us. We're always interested in growing our community for conversations like this one. And even though this conversation is over, we look forward to welcoming you in the future. So until next time, from the War Room, I'm Ron Granieri.
And that concludes our program. Thank you for listening. The views expressed in this podcast reflect those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views, policies, or positions of the U.S. Army or the Department of Defense. Let us know what you think. Provide us your feedback, comments, or suggestions through our webpage at warroom.armywarcollege.edu. And have a great day.